and welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and I am so thrilled today to be bringing you my top 10 movies of summer 2024. This summer flew by, but I will say, just on paper, just putting this list together and trying to narrow it down, this might be one of the better summer movie seasons in quite some time. There were some movies that didn't make this top 10 that I'm like, that's not a top 10 summer movie, but I think it just goes to show that we had so much great variety across all genres. And I'm not even talking about big blockbusters. In fact, only one film on my top 10 is a franchise film. The other 9 films are, standalone films, either the first of a franchise to come, or they are completely unique ideas, or they're adaptations of some other source material. But only one really big piece of IP in my top 10, which is to not say there weren't some great summer blockbusters. I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine was admittedly really fun. Inside Out 2, while not my favorite Pixar film, still left quite a few impactful moments. Furiosa, a big one that obviously was just such a standout in its genre. But again, all these films didn't make my top 10. I think it's just because this was such a strong summer. So I'm really excited to get into it. If you hadn't caught up on all my reviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of this month, I've been going back and doing summer catch-up reviews. So that's where you can find reviews for something like A Quiet Place Day 1, Furiosa, Young Woman in the Sea, Twisters, Inside Out 2, Longlegs, Alien Romulus, all these films that you won't see on this top 10, but that I did at least want to put my thoughts out for. So please go check out those videos. And I don't normally do honorable mentions for top 10 like this, but I'm gonna do it because I think this was such a strong summer. Yorgos Lanthimos' Kind of Kindness, which is just so bizarre and odd, but a really interesting anthology. I actually thought all 3 parts were very strong. As I mentioned, Young Woman in the Sea, this is just a biopic that really surprised me, and I'm surprised Disney isn't putting more stock into advertising, getting the word of mouth out there, because it's really charming. Fly Me to the Moon, another one that I think that Apple has been pretty quiet about. Just a classic, charming tale. Channing Tatum, Scarlett Johansson are both really great. It talks a lot about conspiracy theories and how it can be really harmful when the government tries to interfere with history, and I think that's just a very thought-provoking concept, especially now of all times. Twisters, just a great summer blockbuster. Blink Twice, a really confident Zoe Kravitz debut. I mean, it's themes you've seen in a lot of other films. There's some plot beats that you might have seen in a lot of other films, but just such an ambitious and confident style brought to that film with such a great cast. And another small film that not many people have seen, Reverse the Curse, which is a really charming story about father and son. The reason you guys should check out Reverse the Curse is not only because it's good, but because it also stars my sister, Nina. She has a brief scene toward the end of the film. So if you want to go check out my sister in that movie, it's a really great movie. It's on Hulu and Disney Plus. So that's like my honorary 11th, trying to give the kudos to Nina and to that film. I also wanted to note that there are some films from this summer that I actually saw at past festivals, like Sundance or Sundance a few years ago. In the case of a movie like Am I Okay? There are 5 movies that came out this summer that I had seen previous to the summer, so I didn't include those in this ranking just to spread the wealth and talk about 10 other movies. But those films are Handling the Undead, Rob Peace, Am I Okay?, Thelma, and of course Daughters, which probably would have been in my top 10 if I had put it in there. As I said, I kept it to 10 movies that came out this summer that I saw this summer rather than putting those Sundance films in there. But that's where those went, in case you were wondering, like, did you put those in your list? Did you see those? That's where those are. But I did have a few Sundance films in my top 10 that I didn't see until the summer, so don't worry, some of those are on the list as well. And of course, I have to bring up the worst of the summer. I'm not going to try to harp on these too much, but some films that didn't necessarily work for me. The Idea of You, I did not find that very captivating at all, though I think Anne Hathaway is very good. Mother's Instinct, another film I didn't find very good, but I thought Anne Hathaway was once again very good in it, as well as Jessica Chastain. And that was actually filmed on my childhood street, so it was kind of cool, like seeing my street on film, even though it's not a movie I would necessarily recommend. It's kind of like a Lifetime movie, just with really great actors. But if you're into that thing, then you might like it. If I thought that was just a total tonal misfire, didn't really know whether it was going to try to appeal for an older audience, younger audience. It's kind of a mishmash of a bunch of different things that I don't think was done successfully well. Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. I haven't seen all the other Beverly Hills Cop films except for the first one. So I guess somewhere down the line, I guess the comedy of this franchise was lost, because it's certainly not apparent here. And my worst of the summer is actually Maxine. It was my biggest disappointment. I was going into it so hyped for for it. But it just kind of crashed and burned in all the places that I thought it would really thrive. I think Mia Goth is great, but that's kind of it for me. I really left the theater so disappointed because I loved X and Pearl so much. But enough dwelling on the bad. Let's prop up the good. Let's talk about my top 10 films of summer 2024, and we're kicking it off with one that I think had some buzz earlier in the year, earlier in the summer, but has kind of fizzled out, maybe due to a poor box office performance. But it's one that I have just kind of gone back to in my mind as one that has just been such a thrill ride, and that I think about the performances and the chemistry of the actors. And that is The Fall Guy. This is the film that came out very early on in the summer, but it is just such a blast from start to finish. I think Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt have such good chemistry. I think David Leitch, being a stunt guy, just really knows how to emphasize the action in the perfect moments in this film. Some people would say the plot is a little bit more basic, but I think because I went into the film thinking it would be so stale and one note, I think the fact that the plot took as many twists and turns as it did was actually very exciting for me. I'm someone who is just such a fan of stunt work, and I think it deserves its own spotlight. And I think of any film I've ever seen, really, aside from maybe the John Wick films, but even John Wick doesn't necessarily draw attention to its stunts and directly address it. It has a lot of stunts, but this film directly acknowledges the stunt community and what they're doing for film and the risks they're taking to entertain us, while also still doing it responsibly, and to show how some people tend to abuse it and kind of exploit danger for entertainment in a way. But I think it's done very tastefully. The action set pieces are slick. It's well photographed. There's great tension. Amazing chemistry, of course, from Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. Every time she says spicy margarita, it's the most just beautiful line delivery I've ever heard. And then Ryan Gosling mimicking Emily Blunt saying spicy margarita is even better, when he's, kind of putting on a voice and a British accent and says spicy margarita. I'm going to go get a spicy margarita and enjoy The Fall Guy plenty of more times, because I think it's a great film and just a great way to kick off the summer, because this is one of the first films I saw of the summer movie season, and it just put it on a real high, a real adrenaline rush, if you will. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's really good. At number 9, another film that gave me an adrenaline rush for a genre that I really don't love, which is the Western, but I'm going to go with Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1, directed by Kevin Costner. I just love when a director can just put forth a passion project and every labor of love is felt in every single frame and every single shot. This film is 3 hours and it does take its time, but it never feels like you're just waiting for the scene to just finish up. It feels like each scene has its own purpose, has its own distinct effect on the overall narrative. And I think because you kind of have a different few streams of narratives and different plot lines going on at once, it does help with the pace of the story and making it feel like it's going by in a quick manner. But I just love how Kevin Costner uses the atmosphere and really just kind of romanticizes this beautiful vision of the frontier, and kind of shows this old school kind of classic Western feel and vibe, while also bringing forth progressive themes involving giving more voices to women of the time and indigenous characters of the time. I think that's where Horizon really finds its beauty, is that it kind of romanticizes the style of the classic films we know and love from the Western genre, while still being progressive in its messaging and in its themes. I think it's really well acted. I think there are so many great little actors who pop up in certain places where you're like, oh my God, it's that guy, it's that guy, it's that guy. And I think it's one of those projects that I just have to admire, have to appreciate. I just love seeing Kevin Costner just kind of spill his heart out for all of us to see, even if it's messy in some places, even if it's a little clunky, a little sappy, a little campy, a little cheesy. I mean, we're talking about the Western genre. We're talking about cowboys on horses and grand landscapes and bright colors and high action and standoffs, and it's a big dollop of syrup, of sap, of honey, but it works so well for what this film is trying to accomplish, and I can't wait for the next ones. I'm really sad that we're not going to get them sooner, but I hope with time more people will come around to this one so they can embrace later installments of this franchise, because I think this could be a real hit. Speaking of franchises, I did tease it earlier. My only franchise film on this list comes in here at number 8, and it is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Of all the big franchises this summer that I was looking forward to, obviously I was really looking forward to seeing Furiosa because I really like the Mad Max Fury Road film. I was excited to see Twisters because it's been so long since the original Twister. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a film that I was excited for, but I felt like the chapter had kind of closed with Caesar's story, and I thought, I'm good. I don't need any more. It'll be exciting. I'm excited to see it, but but I was not head over heels, amped up, ready to go, ready to watch Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes until I saw it. And I'm like, wow, this is a necessary sequel. And very rarely will I say that. I'll always say, you know what? I understand how they made the story fit within the franchise, but I think after a certain point, you can kind of let the franchise die. But here, they found such creative ways to expand this franchise and to say that, Caesar, while his story is complete, his legacy has an impact on the generations to come. And I love how this is really a metaphor for religion and how certain like ideas that were once used for good and for healthiness and community can be misconstrued with generations to be taken for something a lot darker. And I think it's just a great parallel for the real world we live in and how sometimes, stuff can get misconstrued as generations pass it down and stories can find kind of, get lost in the telephone game of that generational storytelling. And I think that's what Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes does so well. It is also just gorgeous. It is one of the best visualized films of the summer. I think so many blockbusters come and go where we're like, oh, that just looks so bad for the budget they had. They could have done so much more. Here, every ounce of the budget is felt. Every single ounce of visual effects is just gorgeous to see. It is just such a thrill ride while still taking its time and feeling epic and feeling like it has a purpose in this franchise and not just an unnecessary epilogue like so many people imagined it would be. And now I think it opens the door for even more Apes movies that have a lot of fascinating stuff to say. And I think that's kind of the best kind of franchise revitalization. We saw it with Rise of the Planet of the Apes years ago, how that revitalized a franchise that had become stale with Planet of the Apes. But now it feels like a revitalization of a revitalization. It kind of feels like that double shockwave. And I'm really excited to see what comes next. At number 7, we have the Sundance winner, the Audience Award winner at Sundance, which is Didi, directed by Sean Wang. Now, if you saw Sean Wang's short, Nine Eye and Wai Po, which was nominated for the Oscars last year, you know that he has just such a deep connection with his family. And I think that is definitely evident here. This is a coming-of-age story kind of mirroring his childhood, his emergence as a filmmaker. You kind of get a lot of that in this film. It's kind of reminds you of the Fablemans and the way he kind of like discovers how to shoot film and discovers what angles are and editing. It's all really charming if you are into filmmaking, kind of seeing this kid get his start and watching a director make a movie about his childhood. You realize how autobiographical it is. But where I think it's really emotionally resonant and has a very wide appeal is in its coming of age story in and of itself. I mean, this deals with a kid who is of the age where IM messaging and Facebook and MySpace are really just taking a stranglehold of all these kids' attention. The times where you would lie about your age just so you could get a Facebook before everyone else, because if you had to wait till you were 13 to get a Facebook, you were looked at as kind of a weirdo. Like, oh, you didn't lie about your age to get Facebook when you were 12? Shame on you. We're going to bully you. And it's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous, but that was that generation. That was my generation. I didn't have a MySpace, so I was a few years younger than Sean Wang. But I do think, a lot of the experiences involving social media and just communication between kids is just so hard hitting. It hits me right here in the heart, and I could relate to a lot of it. And I was very unsure about how relatable this would be, because this is a story about an Asian family as well. And I do think they do dive into some of that and some of the family dynamics coming from an Asian household. But I also think, they find a way to make it a very wide appealing thing that anyone can relate to, not necessarily of the Asian experience, not even of the male experience, but just as a kid of this time. I think people outside of that generation, I don't know if they're going to necessarily feel as connected to it as I did, but I think being, of this, time and of this era and seeing how friendships could turn on a dime just because you said or didn't say something on social media, and just the awkwardness and uncomfortability of being a kid, and like, showing off what color braces you were going to have when you went to your orthodontist checkup, like little things. Like the specificity in this film is just so real and raw and so dead accurate that it's almost a little uncomfortable, but it was also one of the most seen films. Like I was so seen from watching this movie. It reminds me most closely to like Eighth Grade, which came out a few years ago, the Bo Burnham directed film, because it just has that specificity about a very specific age that I feel like when we see coming of age films, I think coming of age films, they deal with slightly older age demographics, like high school. But this is kind of like the tail end of middle school, very beginning of high school. It is that eighth grade kind of sentimentality, and it is just an awkward awkward time. It is a very awkward, uncomfortable time. Acne and braces and social media and meeting like romantic interests for the first time, having your first kiss. There's just so many great little awkward conversations, like when they're talking about movies and this girl asks him like, "What's your favorite movie?" So he looks up her MySpace page and sees, "Oh, A Walk to Remember." She likes A Walk to Remember. I'm gonna say A Walk to Remember, and she's like, "You've seen that movie? It's a chick flick." And then like it kind of washes over him, and he gets so embarrassed. Like that is just so real. You don't know how many times that would happen with me, where I'd be like, "Yeah, I've seen that movie," and they're like, "Really? It's for girls? I'm surprised you've seen it." And I'll be like, maybe I haven't seen it," but you don't want to lie because you don't want to seem like a liar either. You just kind of want to fit in and be cool. Like it just hits all those beats just so perfectly. It's a film that really made me emotional. It didn't make me like necessarily well up and cry, because it deals more with the awkwardness and uncomfortability, but it does have some really sentimental and tender moments at the end of the film, especially with Joan Chen, who plays his mother. There's just such really heartwarming things that tie together all the kind of comedy and awkwardness of its coming of age narrative, while also weaving in that filmmaking narrative of this kid who just wants to make skateboarding movies. And to see now that he's actually pursuing it and having people like view his feature length films as an adult, it's a really cool story to see. And I really, really like Dee Dee, so I highly recommend that film as well. I highly recommend all these films, if you didn't notice before. But let's move on to number 6. This is a film that had a very limited release, but is now on movies, so you can go check it out there. It is Kit Zahar's This Closeness. Now, This Closeness is her second film following her first film, which is Actual People. I haven't seen Actual People. This was my first experience with Kit Zahar's work, but wow, am I amazed. Like, she is one of the most exciting, emerging, up-and-coming filmmakers. It's a filmmaker that I had always, like, heard rumblings about ever since Actual People came out, but I never actually sought out her work. But looking at my Letterboxd, so many of my friends and colleagues that's opinions I really, really respect, all rated this, like, 4.5 and 5 stars. So I was like, wow, I really got to check out this film. And I did. And I'm like, yeah, it's brilliant. It's amazing. It's kind of its own riff on like mumblecore cinema. And if you've never like heard the term mumblecore, it's kind of like this kind of wave of independent filmmaking in like the 2000s where you would have these characters, they would just be in one location, but there really wouldn't be any sort of plot. It was just kind of characters talking and at times getting in arguments or just kind of like mumbling about their day. That's why they called it mumblecore, and they were usually very low budget. They usually stayed in like one or two locations. They were very confined, and they didn't really tend to go very extreme in their plot. There was always comes some graphic sexual stuff in those films as well. So this is kind of a riff on that, but obviously seen through a more modernized lens. I think there is a little bit more of a story here than some of your classic mumblecore cinema that you might expect from the 2000s. It follows this couple, Tessa and Ben, who come to Philadelphia for the weekend. Ben is there for his high school reunion, and Tessa is a famous ASMR artist on YouTube. They move into this apartment basically for the weekend, which is shared by this roommate, Adam, which off the bat gives off a little bit of a weird vibe to them. They don't really know how to assess the energy that Adam is giving off. Adam is very much an introvert. And as the film goes along, you start to see how their relationship, Tessa and Ben's, kind of evolves and how we learn bits and pieces of their dynamic, both like the positives and very much so the negatives to their relationship. But also we see a lot of it through the lens of Adam, who is an introvert, who is struggling to connect, whose roommate moved out, and who now he has to like rent out this other room to some people. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have been through that like kind of circumstance of like, oh, you're a stranger, but we have to live with each other. We have to cohabitate. And kind of some of the awkwardness that comes about that. Like, oh, you need to use the living room? Okay. Oh, do you need to, can I use the living room? Do you need to leave? Like all those little awkward steps that happen when you like move in with a stranger for the first time, which is like an experience I feel like a lot of people, like when they first move into college, for example, in like a dorm, kind of have those relatable experiences. But I like how this film kind of paints it where like Adam is kind of this mysterious character, and you don't necessarily know where the narrative is going in terms with Adam's character. Is he a little off? Is there something behind his facade that's endangering, or is he just socially awkward and we just don't know how to tap into his mindset? And I really like how the film kind of explores Adam's character in that way. As an introvert, I definitely felt a lot of the anxieties that Adam feels in this film, but also from Tessa's point of view, as someone whose boyfriend is so extroverted and speaks his mind almost to a harsh, brash way. And then having someone like Adam, who is much more closed off and reserved. She herself is also very closed off and reserved, but she's not afraid to speak her mind to her boyfriend. So she's kind of this like middle ground. And it's really interesting to see her navigate the space between these two guys in her life. One who's a stranger, who she's trying to be nice to and trying to cohabitate with. And then this guy who wants nothing to do with this other stranger, who is also very much involved with this idea of fantasizing his past through his high school reunion. And you also start to see, as he kind of brings more elements into his bubble about his high school experience, and he goes out to bars and catches up with high school friends and old high school flings, how that really kind of aids in the anxiety of this one woman's mindset. And I just think it's so fascinating just watching these three characters navigate this space. As I said, other characters kind of come and go as well. And it just shows such an honest depiction of human behavior and how we interact with people in the space that we're comfortable with and that we're strangers to, and how sometimes it's even more comfortable to interact with strangers than it is the people we are closest to. And it deals with closeness in such an interesting way. I mean, the film is called This Closeness. So there's an idea of proximity and, connection and physical touch that is also very important in this film, and how we connect to others and how we struggle to connect with others when we don't have those means of closeness, and what closeness really means. Is it a physical connection, or is it something more emotional, something more mental, something more psychological? And I just think it's a fantastic film. I think everything top to bottom is so well done. In the first few scenes, I was kind of getting just adjusted to its style because it is so stripped down, it is so simple. But the more and more the film went on, and just the very subtle uses of close-ups and different angles and different framing and composition of actors within the frame, I was able to get this real sense of who Kit Zahar is as a filmmaker and how she views the world as kind of this like extroverted introvert in a way. And I really, really love it. I think it's an amazing film for someone who is just bursting onto the scene. I think 10, 20, 30 years down the line, we're going to look back and see a very full, very amazing career. And I can't wait to say that like I saw one of the first works when it was fresh, when it was new. And I hope you all now have seen this and can like go watch it, because it's really, really great. It's very short, but every single minute like has its purpose, serves its purpose, really feels full, and like it has a wealth of things to say. So I really recommend that film. Moving on now to number 5, a film that is a little bit more mainstream, but it's from one of my favorite filmmakers. It is Trap by M. Night Shyamalan. Listen, M. Night has his hits, he has his misses, and this falls somewhere in the bizarre middle ground where like his misses are now becoming his hits in a way, where he's using the things that people used to criticize about him, like his tendency to write characters in a very alien-like way, stage some awkward like close-ups and very polarizing angles and stuff. He's using that to his benefit by creating this scenario and this circumstance and this character that fits all the little like altruistic conventions that M. Night Shyamalan brings as a director. I think it was the perfect vessel to kind of hold all of these different elements together. I think Josh Hartnett's character being this serial killer, it's a very effective way to communicate that weird, stilted M. Night Shyamalan dialogue, because this is a guy who can't connect to the world. He wants to be a good dad, but he also has these like devilish things going on behind the scenes, which is, I think, also a greater statement about M. Night Shyamalan as a filmmaker as well. The idea that he's known as the guy who gave you The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable and Signs, these twisted little devilish films with all these twists. He's known as the guy who twists things at the end. He's quite literally a twisted filmmaker, but he also has this love for his family, his kids, his daughters. He has 3 amazing daughters that he loves so much. And I think you started to see in the middle of M. Night Shyamalan's career so far, you start to see how he pivots to more family films like The Last Airbender and After Earth. And those are not necessarily the most well-received films, but now he's kind of coming back with a resurgence where he's able to tell these devilishly twisted stories while also still having something heartfelt to say about family. And I think Trap is the perfect marriage of that. And it's the perfect metaphor for his career himself. This guy who has all these devilish little secrets and stories, but also wants to be a family man, and how to balance that life between family and doing something a little naughty. And I think that's kind of what M. Night Shyamalan's whole kind of outlook as a filmmaker is kind of balance between the work and the family. That is really, really fascinating in Trap. It's obviously, heightened to a very extreme degree because this guy's a literal serial killer. He doesn't make horror movies. It's a very different naughty act. One is quite literally illegal and terrible and psychopathic. But I do think it's a great vessel to kind of show his outlook as a filmmaker, as he grows, as he evolves as a filmmaker. I think everything about the way this is shot is so good. It's almost Hitchcockian in the way, you have these long sequences where Josh Hartnett is just taking in the space. A lot of people have said like the musical numbers go on for so long. I'm like, but that's the whole point, is that they go on for so long, but for him, that's the time he needs to assess the room, to see what he's going to do, how he's going to make his next move. And I think you, the audience, because you're able to kind of live in real time with him through a majority of this film, you were able to kind of anticipate his next move alongside with him and kind of contemplate it for yourself. And it's really cool to see what decisions they end up going with in this film and all the different plot twists and turns, which are not necessarily to the degree of something like The Sixth Sense, where a plot twist happens and it totally just like recontextualizes the whole movie for you. But I think there's also something refreshing in that you can just enjoy the little twists throughout, the little kind of maneuvers and zigs and zags, rather than having one big really cataclysmic bomb drop on the plot at the end. Like, I think there's a really interesting way that he kind of unfolds this narrative that's a little different from what we've seen from him as of late. So I will say right now, one of my new favorites of M. Night's. I think it's a fantastic film, and I think it might be my favorite since Unbreakable. I really do think so. I think it's one of the strongest films in his repertoire of what I think are, at the very least, fascinating films. So I'd highly recommend Trap. If you gave it a shot and you don't know if you necessarily liked it or not, I would give it another chance and kind of take all that subtext into mind about M. Night Shyamalan and his whole path as a director and what his style is used for and how it's used and how it functions, and you might like it more. And if not, hopefully you can still enjoy the Josh Hartnett performance because it's really, really good. Moving on, my number 4, it is a review I just did last week, so I'm not going to talk about it too long, but it is Hitman. This is a great star vehicle for Glenn Powell to just flex his chops as an actor. He has so much charisma that I feel like some people just want to dismiss him as merely a movie star, but I think he has so much great raw natural acting talent, and that is shown here as he kind of chameleons his way into all these different personas. It's about this guy who basically works for the FBI, pretending to be a different hitman for these different people, and getting them to confess on tape for the FBI that they want to put these hits on these people in order to arrest them. But in doing so, he actually meets someone that he finds a connection with and is able to actually kind of like talk off the ledge. And then he starts a romance with her, and it's obviously very complicated because you have this guy pretending to be someone else in a relationship with someone that he was supposed to get arrested by the FBI, who is now also trying to use him to bust other people, but he wants to focus his attention on her. It's just a big cobweb of different ideas and different strands and different plot beats, but it all coheres so well. I mean, Richard Linklater is just a master at what he does. So obviously the script and the way these characters are written, it never feels messy, even though there's a lot going on, even though there's a million things happening a minute. It still feels like it has the room to breathe and be kind of like a hangout film, like you would expect from Richard Linklater, where there are scenes where these characters are just sitting and connecting and talking and, being romantic and being sexual and like having this real steaminess. And I don't know, it's just really, really captivating the way he's able to balance the action and the romance so efficiently, while also just being an overall character study in how we showcase ourselves to the world and what masks we literally hide behind and what disguises we put on for others, in trying to convey our true selves. But is that our true self at the end of the day? Who's to say? Hitman says it, and I think it's a great film. I think it's an excellent work, and it will still be probably one of my top 10 films come the end of this year. Moving on to number 3, something that I think is one of the best of this year, and certainly one of the best of the summer, and maybe the best picture at the Oscars next year. It's Sing Sing, directed by Greg Kuidar. I've done a whole review on this one as well, so I'm not going to go too deep into what Sing Sing is, but it is just a powerful story about how theater connects us all, even those who are struggling, who have these demons, who have these, tortured or darker pasts, and how they're able to kind of come together and find commonality. It follows Coleman Domingo as this guy who is wrongfully accused and has been in prison for years and years trying to get out. It's kind of like the Morgan Freeman story in Shawshank Redemption. He keeps getting denied and he keeps wanting to get out, but he keeps getting denied, and it kind of tortures him and it puts him low and it just beats him down. But through this theater community that they're able to assemble in this prison, they're able to find something beautiful amidst the darkness. And I think that's what this film says and preaches so well. I think this is the best acting I've seen across the board in any film this year. Just the way all these ensemble members interact with one another. Most of the actors in this film are real life inmates who went through the prison system and went through the Sing Sing, this theater program, and have come out the other end in a good way. And I love seeing them kind of pay it forward and play themselves playing parts in a play. It's kind of this weird like Inception theatrical thing, but it is just so beautiful. Just every scene resonates. It'll probably make you cry at the end. There's such strong performances. It's a great prison drama in addition to being a great theatrical piece as well. And I just think this is a film that is going to resonate with people, and I can see why A24 is giving it a slow rollout, because it really wants it to build word of mouth. They didn't want to just release it in theaters, have it come out for a weekend, and then have it disappear and have no people talking about it. A24 is consistently releasing this film so more and more people can catch it in a few weeks' time, in a few months' time, and eventually when we get into the Oscar season, then it can have kind of built this snowball effect and kind of had its impact to where I hope it gets a lot of nominations for Oscars and plenty of other things. I think this is a front runner for SAG Ensemble for sure at the SAG Awards. It is just one of the most touching, beautiful representations of how theater can connect us all and change us and make us better and get us through hard times, which, speaking of, my number 2 is a film that does exactly that, but I think slightly better, maybe. And that is Ghostlight. This is a film about a guy who is struggling with the death of his son. And in order to cope with it, he actually stumbles upon, I mean, he doesn't choose to go, but he stumbles upon this theatrical group. And they say, hey, you want to come join us? We're reading Romeo and Juliet. We're going to just read this script aloud. Come join us. Come join us. And obviously, he's doesn't know what to make of it. He's like, I don't know. I don't read Shakespeare. I don't read plays. You know, my daughter, she's an actress. She's in plays, but like, I don't do this. I don't do this. And throughout the course of the film, you start to see how not just the theatrical experience in general, but specifically this play, Romeo and Juliet, and Shakespeare's verse and his beautiful language, how they speak to him and his personal, tragedy so directly. I mean, his son, you find out the circumstances of how his son passed, and you start to see his own family dynamics mirrored in the text of Romeo and Juliet, and you can start to see how this changes him and how it makes him more empathetic and allows him to tap into his emotions, because this whole film he's so closed off. He doesn't know how to connect with the world. He doesn't know how to express his grievance, how to express the fact that he's aching, he is hurting, he is grieving. He doesn't know what to do. He just bottles it up and then has these like outbursts of anger through reading this play and playing this part and getting into the text of Shakespeare, and also celebrating this text with a bunch of other actors who are passionate and just want to put on a play and connect and be there together with one another, forming this community, and bringing his own daughter and wife into the scene as well. He is able to really kind of find that emotional catharsis that was missing this whole time. I think the fact that like they are studying Romeo and Juliet here and they are like working through the Shakespeare and the language, I think that is what slightly elevates this one for me, just because I am such a lover of Shakespeare, and I do think Shakespeare is such a universal thing that people can connect to, because they are timeless tales. They have been riffed on so many times, but the reason they've been riffed on is because they tell so many universal stories. The idea of rivals and feuds and families who don't get along, and the blame game and the resentment you can have for another group or another party. I think that's stuff that Romeo and Juliet the play hits on really well, that I think is brought into this story really effectively as well, and how it parallels to his own life and his own crisis and his own emotions. And another reason I slightly preferred this to Sing Sing is also because I felt myself getting caught up in the emotions a lot more. Like, Sing Sing was really powerful and I cried at the end, but this film, like, about a half hour in, there's a moment with like a group hug, and if you've seen the film, you know what it is. Like, just that group hug just like shattered me, and I was bawling. I actually watched this morning when I'm recording this video, and I was just a puddle. I was just a puddle of tears. I think the way this is staged is also so beautiful, just the different lighting and the different textures, the different close-ups, the way they kind of reveal the information slowly but surely, where you can kind of grasp what's going on in his past, and he's lost someone, but you don't necessarily know all the details. But as the film goes on, you start to learn more and more, and it honestly becomes a little bit haunting in how closely connected it is to Romeo and Juliet, and how this must be killing this guy inside to even think about it and talk about it. But I think that's what theater can do for us. It can help us unlock those deepest emotions and those deepest fears, those deepest anxieties, those deepest embarrassments, and those deepest sadnesses, and really pull them out of us and make us confront them. There's a great sequence where they're doing these acting exercises, and the acting coach brings up this guy Dan and another young guy and says, like, I want you to ask him a really intrusive question. And he goes, do you like Michael Jordan? And he's like, was that intrusive? And then the other guy gives him a really intrusive question, and he immediately like blows up, and she's like, there it is. That's real emotion right there. And I just love seeing that, because that was like my journey through acting and through taking acting classes, was finding those moments where I could feel the most angry or the most sad or the most vulnerable, the most embarrassed, and find that purity, to where now when I play a character on stage, I can tap into those feelings and those emotions and be like, oh, this is a time where I felt just the most anxiety or the most stress, and really being able to pull those real life feelings and bring it to a character, which admittedly is very tough to do, because especially in theater, when you play a character 8 shows a week, on Broadway, let's say, like, you're doing 8 shows a week. How do you keep it fresh? How do you make it so that every show feels like it's the first time you're having these emotional experiences? Like, how was Ben Platt able to cry every single night on Dear Evan Hansen at the same degree every single time? And it's because of these exercises you find in Ghostlight, and these experiences, this key that you can use to like unlock all these emotions and like trigger something in you to find those emotional bursts. And I just think this film is just so good. I just love it so much. I watched this today and I want to watch it like 6 more times. I was hesitant to put this as high as I did on this list, but when I was looking at it, I was like, you know what? This is one of the greatest examples of how theater can connect us, not just to other people like Sing Sing. I think Sing Sing is a lot about how theater connects people with one another, but I think Ghostlight shows how theater can connect us to ourselves and can make us realize the things in ourselves that we are not able to confront or scared to confront. And I think that is what Ghostlight does so well. And I think it's a beautiful family piece. I think this is also one of the greatest ensembles of the year. It's just a terrific film. So if you can get out to see Ghostlight or Sing Sing, I think they make a great double feature with one another. It's really a 2A, 2B type thing. One is going to slightly edge out the other one, but I do think on a given day, Sing Sing might be higher. But neither of them are my number one. My number one, this should come as no surprise of anyone who watches this channel. It is I Saw the TV Glow, directed by Jane Schoenbrunn, who I still haven't seen their first work. We're all going to the World's Fair, and I really need to remedy that. I'm going to make sure that is part of my 31 Days of Halloween this year coming up in October, because I need to watch that film because I'm such a fan of Jane Schoenbrunn's style. There's a real nostalgia to be had in this film and how it captures that kind of feeling of getting around the TV and watching appointment television that maybe your parents said, you can't stay up late and watch that. It's too mature for you. And, the kind of that defiance you get as a kid when you want to watch something that your parents told you can't stay up to watch. It just really deals in that nostalgia so well. But there's an even deeper meaning to be had about identity and how the TV you consume or the media you consume can be a way of connecting to the world. I mean, a lot of these top films are all about connecting through art, but I think that is some of the art I'm most drawn to, is the art that shows us how we as humans are able to connect to the world through the means of art, because that is what I do for a living as an actor on stage or in film, but also as a critic, as someone who assesses art. How does art make you feel is one thing, but how does art make you who you are is a whole other can of worms that I think this film really unlocks. And I think similarly to Ghostlight and even Sing Sing, it unlocks that kind of uncomfortable truth about ourselves that we're maybe too scared to admit, but that we know is always there. And I think in this film specifically, the way it explores transness and the idea where you could have this like deep identity underneath that you don't necessarily know how to verbalize what it is, but there's a feeling, that there's something different about you. You feel like you're in this cage of sorts. And it's really about how you burst through, how you let that TV literally glow from inside you. And I think it's a great testament to art and powerful art and art that we can, use to channel our emotions. And I think there's a big stigma about like, oh, you kids should be outside. You shouldn't spend all your day in front of the TV watching TV. And I think that's true. I think there is a danger to spending all day inside watching TV. And I think the film acknowledges that in a way, how it can also consume you. But I also think there's something good to be found through television and film and theater and books, that is also worth mentioning. And I think there's something to be said about that, especially with like Jane Schoenbrunn. You can see how their influences kind of inform them as a filmmaker and them in their own identity. I just think it's a fantastic film. I think it's visualized better than any other film I've seen this year in terms of the colors and the use of horror imagery. It's a great horror film, but it's not the kind that like you get a ton of jump scares and you feel like, okay, that was fun, but whatever, it was a fun time. No, this is horror that really like sits with you and lingers and has these really interesting metaphors layered on top of them that honestly makes it scarier than maybe some of your jump scare horror. But I think because of its messaging and the idea of like there still being time and it's never too late to really discover who you are and your true self, I think that stuff is so uplifting that it kind of balances the horror in a really nice way to where I feel emotionally moved by this film. I'm scared of a lot of it because it is a horror film, but I also feel this emotional resonance and I feel like I can let out a good cry in the way that I'm emotionally touched and not just because I'm scared out of my mind. But there are visual sequences and just montages and moments that, you could literally get scared out of your mind. So I think I Saw the TV Glow is just one of the most perfect horror films I've seen in the most recent memory. I think it's one of those films that, like Get Out for the Black experience, could be kind of that opening door to trans cinema and trans horror and just the idea of acknowledging transness in a much more widespread lens in media, because it's still something that I feel like isn't tackled nearly enough as themes of like gayness or blackness, or just general anxieties and fears of fitting in. That's all very well depicted in cinema. It can even go further in that lens, but I feel like transness is still something that's still fresh. It's still a little bit taboo in some areas and people don't necessarily know how to acknowledge it and talk about it. And I think this is a film that could really open that door. So I think it's one of the great films. I think it's going to withstand the test of time, I hope. And I think it is one of the crowning achievements of this year and of all years. And it is my favorite film of the summer. But there you go. That is my top 10. I am very happy with this top 10. You've got some great action. action with The Fall Guy. You've got a great Western with Horizon. You've got a great franchise film with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, great coming of age with DD, a great mumblecore indie low budget film with This Closeness, a fun M. Night Shyamalan romp thriller with Trap. You have a really great acting showcase of Glenn Powell and a great comedy and romance with Hitman. You have a really poignant drama with Sing Sing, an even more devastating family drama with Ghostlight, and then just a really cool experimental horror film reflecting some really powerful themes with I Saw the TV Glow. So there's my top 10. I hope you all check them out. Let me know down in the comments what your top 10 of the summer is, because there were a lot of great films that came out this summer, and I'm really excited to hear about all of them, all your favorites, all your least favorites if you want, but please keep it respectful down in the comments below. And stay tuned. We got some great stuff coming up in September. And of course, as I teased in October, our 31 Days of Halloween is coming back this year, but we're going to do things a little differently. And I will share more info on that in the next couple of weeks. But I hope you all have a great, safe end of your summer. And thank you for spending some of your time of your day with me, listening to me gush about all my favorite films of the year. Let me hear your gushing down in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say about all these movies and all your favorite movies of the summer. And thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned, subscribe, please like. It helps us grow this channel. And please tune into the Dyl Pickle Podcast, where you can find this on audio form if you don't feel like looking at my face for 40 so minutes. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.